Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and we continue. We're getting very close to the end of our expectations series here tonight. Going to talk about a tight end acquired from the Bears, Durham Smythe, and also the kicker, Tyler Loop. Joining me to do that is Coach DC, Derek Coleman of All 22 Films. Derek, how you doing?
Doing good, man. Thanks for having me. Like I said, pre-show, apologize it took so much to get me here, but glad to be here. I love this series that you do. It's a lot of fun, and also because it lets me know we're getting close, to camp and then the preseason.
Well, I appreciate you, Coach. And this is, I know a lot of people love your work on All 22 Films, and it's not just Ravens fans, it's Ravens and Lions now, or are you even expanding further than that this year?
Yeah, I mean, it became natural when McDonald went to the Seahawks to spend some time talking about their defense. I mean, there was how much do I actually know about the Mike McDonald defense? I mean, maybe 40%, 50, if you want to apply some number, but was able to take advantage of that a little bit. And then, of course, once the Lions don't make the playoffs and the Ravens don't make the playoffs, it became easy to focus on them for the playoff run, which was, so amazing for Seattle, obviously. So yeah, I mean, it depends on the week. Like I've already done my schedule for the season, and there'll be some weeks where, like for example, week one, uh, Seattle plays on Wednesday. I'll obviously have a couple of days there to do some videos on the Seahawks, and then the Ravens and Lions play that Sunday. So, the way the schedule works out is kind of crazy sometimes, but sometimes it helps me out because I can just keep on work on one team for a couple of days and then the other for the next two. So, mostly Ravens, but Lions and Seahawks as well. Maybe I have ADHD, and that's why I have to just continue to add a team.
All right, my friend. Well, let's start off talk about Durham Smythe a little bit. A ninth-year player. He'll be 31 in August. Not a young guy for certain. Another veteran brought in on this team. Played all 17 games with the Bears in 2025, but 334 snaps. I found this a little bit interesting. 201 came as a run blocker. Now, teams that run the football a lot, that's often true, but teams don't run the football in that proportion. So he's on the field, way more than normal to be a run blocker. He also had a pretty good year as a pass blocker, but receiving opportunities really minimal, with only 9 targets, I believe, last year, including the postseason. He might have had 12, including the postseason, but it was in that neighborhood. I'm gonna get that number here before we keep going.
Yeah, he's an interesting player for me. This first of all, the familiarity with the offense from last year, and I think Smythe even some podcasts confirmed, hey, this is the same stuff we ran last year, like same terminology. To my knowledge, that's what he said. So I think that's important. That he's got some familiarity with it. Obviously, he's a different guy than an Isaiah Likely. He's a different guy than Mark Andrews, and
Mhm.
and he probably has a foot in the Pat Ricard circle. And if you think of like a Venn diagram, um, I think a lot is. I think it's a very challenging year for him, Smythe. And what I mean is the fact that um, he's got to give us more than 4 or 9 receptions, in my opinion. He
Right.
can at various points in his career. I think he's had 30 receptions twice. Um, in that offense, the Bear, I'm going to call it the Ben Johnson offense. I know that
Okay.
Declan Doyle, his coaching time reaches back to Sean Payton. I hope we see more Ben Johnson than Sean Payton. The design element, the preparation, the ability to attack people differently each week, and make what is it? I've heard Ben Johnson say before. We want to make every play look the same, whether it's run or pass. And I think that's where they're headed. I mean, you would know, and people that get to go watch, the minicamp stuff and training camp. I think that Smythe has got his hands full trying to be. We can't be whatever the numbers were. It sounded like roughly 62, 63%. We can't be 63% run when he's on the field, if that's what I heard right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's probably about right. About 60%, I would say. Yeah. Right. 201 of 334. I think that math we could do pretty easily enough to multiply
Yep.
by 3. So, yeah, that won't, the Ravens won't run the ball that often. And if they do, it'll be a great season, by the way. Nobody should be complaining about the Ravens running the ball 60% of the time, because what it'll mean is we're running it right down everybody's throat. And winning a lot of games really big in the early Jackson manner. But yeah, like just confirmed, it was 9 targets the entire year, including 3 in the playoffs where he caught 2 out of 3 balls, but 36 total yards. So he's got 4.0 yards per target. Obviously, that number's not good. He'd been a guy who caught the ball a little bit more in the past. I'd still the Raven I would from the recent past that I'd probably more uh, make him akin to is maybe a Nick Boyle. Nick Boyle was a pretty darn good pass blocker at one time, and also a guy who
Yeah.
could catch the football a little bit. And uh,
Pre-knee injury, yeah, of course.
yeah,
That changed things, unfortunately, right?
yeah, oh, for sure. And in the case of the Ravens, I do think they're going to play. There's three schools of camp. Three schools. People who think we're going to play more 11, people who think we'll play more 12, and people who think we'll play more 13. And I think if you're comparing it to 2025, all three are probably correct.
Yeah,
That
right.
they're going to lose a whole bunch of 21 snaps because Patrick Ricard's not around anymore. That might have been
Hmm.
half the snaps, and then all those have to be redistributed somewhere. And particularly when we're talking about the apparent formation, meaning what the opposing defensive coordinator
Right.
gets to see before he makes the substitutions, then it's going to be more 11, 12, and 13 because that's pretty much all there is that the NFL runs on a regular basis. A few gimmicky teams run some 10. There's some
Right.
01 out there probably, but there just isn't. There's not much else you can do when you're in the goal line. Sometimes you run 14, but it's really unusual to run anything but those four primary packages, and the Ravens are
Hmm.
basically eliminating one.
Yeah, and for me, like watching Smythe in Chicago last year, I think I have my hard drive kind of filled up on my second laptop. Had to kind of offload some of it, as far as film, because the full-in game films take up a lot of space. I watched a lot of Bears offense in the
Mhm.
offseason here, and I'm excited. I'm super excited. I think I was excited when we got Munkin. Coach Evans from Sip the Tally
Yep.
Films. He had some knowledge of Munkin and had actually gone to some coaching clinics where Munkin presented, and so I was already excited. But then after speaking to him and actually doing I think a video with him, I became more excited, and we got great return out of that investment. And Munkin parlayed it into a head coaching job, like awesome. Even though things didn't end well last year. For me, I'm just as excited, if not more so, here because this is a guy who comes from a creative mind, Ben Johnson. The way that Ben Johnson has used tight ends in the past, and this is related to, I think, Smythe, obviously, um, 12 personnel and one tight end being in the backfield set up as a fullback, but it's not just, direct flow stuff. I call direct flow when the halfback or the tailback and the fullback are both flowing in the same directions, as
Mhm.
opposed to split flow, right? One guy going to the right, one guy going to the left. He does a ton of stuff that Ravens fans hopefully are going to be excited about or get a chance to see where um, the fullback is actually stepping off the midline and then veering back the other way once the quarterback clears. I call it giving the quarterback the midline for a moment.
Mhm.
You just got to get your butt off the midline so that the quarterback and the halfback can execute their steps. And sometimes it's a play action. I remember seeing it for the first time, and I was like, I was like, thank God, I never ran into anybody who ran that stuff at the high school level because it makes things difficult for your inside linebackers. Basically, Ben Johnson and hopefully by proxy here or extension, Declan Doyle, they put inside linebackers in a ton of conflict.
Mhm.
And for my money, with Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson, and what we've got at the receiver position, I think Doyle's set up. I think he's really set up to have a great year. And to me, Smythe should be a part of it. 12 receptions, 15, 18, somewhere in that range, I think is realistic.
Okay.
But to your point from earlier, hopefully we're running the ball a lot. Hopefully we run a lot of 11, 12, and 13. That means we're possessing the ball for long stretches and the defense is getting people off the field.
Right. And the apparent formation changes to a 21, because they're going to be running out games, and I think they'll do that largely with having one of those tight ends in the backfield, whether it's Smythe or Cuevas. I want to go back to your comment about Doyle, because after hearing Doyle speak at camp, I'll just say this: I don't want him to be Sean Payton, and I don't want him to be Ben Johnson. I want him to be Declan Doyle. I'm
Of
impressed with that
course.
guy. Yeah, and man, is that guy impressive. He is very smart. You could players have gravitated towards him immediately. Lamar Jackson is highly deferential and very positive about what he's doing. I think this is as the possibility to be something really cool and new, and I kind of probably feel the way I do about Doyle about the way I did about McDonald taking over the defense in terms of that kind of a certainly very brainy and talented younger coach taking over a group like that. He's certainly been prepped for this job, and even though he's only 30, I don't think it's going to be a problem from what I can
Absolutely.
see.
I
Yeah,
mean, spent time with Peyton, two different stops, right? New Orleans and
yep,
then Denver.
Denver.
And I think it's important to mention too that this is first of all my observation. What I observed just a little bit that I saw, he's in charge. And we said the same thing about Monken when he came here. Monken's in charge, and you have to be at that level. You know yourself. You're at practice. There's part of it is what we are actually teaching, and part of it too is presentation. You've got to have presentation so the other players see who's in charge. We know who's going to be in charge once the ball's snapped, or once we're on the field is Lamar, Derek Henry, and all those guys. But as far as Doyle's progression and what he's been exposed to, he's in Chicago last year, not just with Ben Johnson, but also with Eric Bieniemy.
Yeah,
And Bieniemy spent a ton of time, and now he's back in Kansas
Kansas
City.
City.
I'm actually, to me as a Ravens fan, I'm actually more worried about Kansas City now. I think you can look at Mahomes' stats and you can look at some of the things that have occurred. Yes, there's some crossover with, Tyreek Hill leaving. Don't get me wrong, but Bieniemy is no BS. Everyone knows that. I think that he's a upfront kind of guy. And Doyle, to me, when I watched a little bit of him, I was like, he's in charge. He knows what he wants to do. He's got his own plan, and the players are following up with it. That's why I'm glad he brought Smythe. Smythe knows the offense, knows the calls. How big of a piece of our offense is he going to be? Obviously not, huge from a production standpoint, but man, I think we could get to midseason and say things similar to Smythe that we said about Ricard, which is, the pass pro is better when he's on the field. The
Mm-hmm.
run game is better when he's on the field. I look at his snaps for the last 2 or 3 years. I think he might get more snaps, and part of that is related to what we have in the tight end room behind him, because I
Yeah.
don't think that either one of those guys is ready at all for that type of versatility that will be asked of Smythe. And I'm not saying that they're not talented guys. I'm a huge Cuevas guy. I was a big fan of him, before we selected him.
Yeah, probably if I had to guess, it'll be a 6 offensive linemen that they play on a lot of extra tight end snaps. So that'll be one of the forms of 12 that they show the opposition. Is you and that's a form of 12 that you're actually giving away something to the opposing defensive coordinator. I want to talk about Smythe's receiving here. We kind of move this along a little bit. But 2 awful receiving stats he's got. He's made just 6 of 22 contested catches in his career. That's not supposed to happen with a bigger guy. He's got kind of short arms, but for a tight end anyway, that is not good. The other one, he's got 142 career catches, and you alluded to the fact that he'd had some receptions earlier in his career at Miami. Last 2 years, he's had just 0.4 yards per route run and 3.6 yards per target combined over a 2-year period. But he has only 1 missed tackle forced to go with 142 career catches. That to me is just it's one of these things that it stands out there as one of the weird statistics, and I've quoted it a number of times on this show. But it's probably, I was saying about a 30th, but it's probably a 20th of the rate that I would expect, 5% of the rate I would expect from a tight end on that many receptions.
Yeah, it's going to be on design stuff, play action, where we get him open, number one. Number two, I don't even know, the film that I saw, keep in mind too, he's behind Loveland and Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet's a very good tight end.
Yep.
And for them to draft Loveland, but then still play Smythe as much as they did with those 2 guys, I think that speaks to what he can get out there and do from a blocking standpoint. As far as the missed tackle stuff, yeah, I mean, he's not going to out-athlete people or create extra yards after the catch. It's going to have to be by design. For me, it kind of reminds me of Hibner. When I watched the Hibner film from college, I just didn't see it. If a defender approached, they tackled him. I mean, it was, in the flats probably a dozen times. I like the pick. Don't get me wrong. I like the pick, like the talent. But I saw him out in the flats one-on-one with a lot of space on both sides, basically what I would call a 2-way go, and he gets tackled. 10 or 11 of those times. Maybe it wasn't 12. Maybe it was 8 of those times. Same thing kind of applies to Smythe. I did, obviously Ravens fans know, and you mentioned it in the beginning, following Ben Johnson's track, he finds ways to use these types of players. Years ago in Detroit, he had a Penn State fullback named Jason Cabinda, who's since retired, and he was a pretty good fullback. They drafted Laporta in 2023, And Laporta, not only at the time, I think he set the record for catches for a rookie tight end with 86, but he was also playing fullback like 6 or 8 times a game. It was shocking to me to see someone asked to do that at the rookie level. We don't have that, right? We don't got nothing like that with Hibner and Cuevas at all. So I'm expecting Smythe to play a lot. How much production he gives us. I think it'd be great if he could give us 12, 15, or 18 catches on a high percentage target basis, which to me means
Right.
it's all by design.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly if the Ravens went to a more regular levels scheme on boots where they, zone block left, naked boot right, you have Jackson out there, and you're looking at 3 levels. I mean, a good chance that the inline guy blocking that edge player, and it just kind of gives him an initial nudge, is going to be a player like Smythe, could be Cuevas also, and then goes out on that basically what I call a level 0 route, the route right at the line of scrimmage. That's the last resort. You end up getting a lot of receptions out of just that. And Boyle got some from it. Boyle and Lamar also, and I thought this was interesting, really got a shorthand going, particularly in that 2019 season, on where Boyle needed to go to make space for himself on an extended play. And when I say they had the shorthand, that means Lamar knew where that was, and they would like to throw to him. You look at that touchdown he had against Buffalo, for example. That was a real good example in 2019 of exactly that kind of space creation and whatnot. And it'd be great if Smythe could have that. He's got the big advantage right now that his reps are coming with Lamar now in camp. So Cuevas and Hibner are going to have trouble getting the reps with Lamar to really build that that synergy. But I agree with you, by the way, on Hibner. Go back to him for just 1 second. Hibner was a guy in college who had never shown any big playability until really his last 4 games of college play ever played. And then he had a 30-yard play each of those games. But what I saw was, and maybe this is good, maybe this is bad, he played with Jennings at SMU, and he was able to get behind defenses largely because of the wiggle that Jennings was showing in the backfield and how much that was bothering the safety on his side. And he had multiple plays where he got down the seam and got the ball behind the secondary that contributed to a pretty darn big yak number. It wasn't his broken tackles that did that. It was a yak off these busted plays that created a lot of advantages for Hibner. Great athlete, but I don't love him as a prospect the way I liked a lot of the other tight ends in this class, including some of the guys who didn't get drafted.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, some of those guys that didn't get drafted, was it Trigg was a 7th,
yeah.
or he didn't get drafted yet?
Daquan Wright also, yeah.
Yeah, I know there's other factors there. For me, as far as Hibner goes, there was, and I think it does relate to Smythe in that, I just don't see a path on the field for him in 2026 at all. I just don't. And I could be way wrong there. I have an inflated opinion or evaluation of Cuevas. He was one of the guys I thought would sneak into a 4th or 5th round spot somewhere because of the pass receiving skills. But, I think a lot is going to be asked of Smythe, and it's a hinge point for me. Even though I do think he's a really good player, it's a hinge point for me as far as how this year goes. We lost Likely and Ricard, and Smythe, cannot, how much of Likely's role can he fulfill? None, very little, at all. How much of Ricard's? A lot. He certainly can do some of those things. And in fact, I think as far as lateral movement skills on blocking schemes, he's a little bit quicker than Ricard, in my opinion. It really doesn't matter who you put in front of Derrick Henry, though.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I agree with you completely on he's a little bit quicker than Patrick Ricard, but he's also, I mean, isn't he kind of taking Charlie Kolar's snaps? Because Kolar certainly, a fine, pretty decent pass blocker anyway. He gave you something as a receiver, and honestly, that's been more than Smythe the last couple of years. And he, certainly gives you something as in the run blocking game. So hopefully, if Smythe replaced Charlie Kolar on a 1-for-1 basis, I think it would mean probably less total tight end snaps because I don't think Hibner will match with Likely's total snap count. But we'll see. So we'll save some of this predictive stuff for a good and great season. But it's going to be very interesting to see how this unfolds. But I'm so excited to see how he deploys what is really a very broad set of receiving weapons still. And one thing I really hope they don't do is go get veteran talent at either of these positions, either wide receiver and tight end. I don't think it's likely a tight end. I think they're kind of forced into a position where they have to play the cards they have. But
Right.
at wide receiver, they could go out and get Stephon Diggs, and what it's going to mean is you have to
Mm.
jettison somebody off the back end like Wester or
Right.
carry 7 wide receivers. When you don't really need to expend the roster spot there, so you cut Ali because of that.
I like, I like going back when I watched the Bears film. You saw a lot of inefficiency from what was perceived to be their top two receivers. I'm talking about DJ Moore and the other guy, the big receiver whose name I forget right now, but he's a younger player. The guy that was, to me, their best receiver by the end of the season was Luther Burden. He was spectacular in some of their late season games. Super dangerous guy, and I think that projects really well for Zay Flowers, in my opinion. Burden, I thought, was possibly the most talented receiver, or one of the two
Yeah.
or three most talented guys in that draft. Went down a little further, for various reasons, and Chicago's got him. So I think the offense projects well. You're going to see, if we're on schedule, we're going to see a lot of designed pass plays off of play action that get these guys open through scheme, through route utilization. In my opinion, I think that sets up well for some of our receiving threats: Andrews, Flowers, Bateman, among others.
One of the things that people used to complain about, probably more with Roman, because everybody wanted to find ways to hate Roman. Even though he's incredibly successful getting Lamar to do great things early in his career. But one thing they complained about was overlapping of routes, that people ended up in the same spot as the ball was thrown. And of course, as a coach how much route overlap there is normally in the design of plays. A lot by design. Anything that involves any kind of a pick or a rub or a cross in the middle of the field where you're trying to either do whatever you call it, a rub or whatever.
Mesh concept, yeah,
Yeah,
double
mesh concept.
two drags, yeah, two drags.
I don't know why I couldn't come up with that word right there. But anyway, yeah, when you're doing those kind of things, there is natural points, and the ball can come out quickly. It can come off out schedule. People could be in the same space, and sometimes it's still okay for that to happen. I do expect, just based on the way he talks, based on the way things are set up in practice, that I think we're going to see a lot of consciousness of forcing defense to defend every blade of grass. Monken talked about it when he first came to town. I think Doyle might be even better at implementing route concepts and combinations that cause that to be true. So I'm really excited about that part. And I still have no idea what this offense is going to look like. No idea at all.
I didn't. I wasn't able to attempt to say what I thought it was at first, and then I was just like, all right, well, I'll just commit. I just think it's going to be Ben Johnson 2.0. I just, Ben Johnson. And if we get 90% of that, this guy's not going to be here very long, because Ben
Right.
Johnson is regardless of what Lions fans want to talk about the way he left Detroit. And that was, that playoff loss to the Commanders was probably the worst game plan and play calling that I saw from Ben Johnson, really, other than Carolina late in the season in 2022. They would have made the playoffs in 2022, but they dropped a game to the Panthers in Charlotte. And I thought Ben Johnson's play calling was bad, but that division round playoff loss to the Commanders was awful. I mean, awful. And so Lions fans, his the way he left, left a sour taste in their mouth. But the reality is, I mean, as talented, as gifted a play caller and a designer as there is in the world, in my opinion. And Doyle got to spend a year with him and Eric Bieniemy, who the thing I hope he pulls from Bieniemy, and the Chiefs have been great at this for years. They've been great at it against us, is actually like pick and rub concepts.
Yep.
I compare the Ravens offense under Roman, and even to an extent Monken, to one that is like isolationist in
Yeah.
basketball. Basically, we think, this is my philosophy, this is my projection, what I think I perceive. We, as the Ravens offensive staff, we think we're better than you. We don't need a pick or a rub concept to beat you. We're just going to beat you. Whereas the Chiefs, the Bills, even Ben Johnson to an extent, Andy Reid, obviously, and Bieniemy, those guys were great at scheming up pick rub concepts. This year, when we faced the Chiefs, what was it, week three. I don't even remember the weeks
4.
now.
Yep.
Four. So the first fourth down of the game, they literally go quads to the right, and they go with a pick concept into the flats, and the guy beats Marlon. Well, I mean, I say he beats Marlon. It's just a pick concept. There's no way for Marlon to defend it in man. It's impossible to get there. So I hope we see a little more of it to help our guys out and maybe increase their efficiency from
It's
a catch
interesting point
percentage standpoint.
you make about isolation. If we go back to over the last, let's say, Lamar era, you could pick a lot of receivers where isolation really was the thing they used exclusively. First of all, with tight ends, with Mark Andrews on a lot of his plays where they try and get Mark Andrews open over the middle with play action, that's very much isolationist. They're trying to see what other elements of the safety pairing they can break off from that. Marquise Brown is probably the ultimate isolation player they used during the time because he really loved to run the deep ball, and that's an isolation play. Last year they had DeAndre Hopkins. How did they use him? Well, they tried to get him one-on-one on the outside the numbers, an awful lot as a percentage of his targets, and they were trying to isolate even for a contested catch in those situations. So you're right, they haven't used pick and rub. I did ask Harbaugh about that once, and he got kind of, I wouldn't call it upset, but it's almost like he was just in full denial of the thing. I asked him, I said, the Chiefs and Steelers basically had run a lot of rub and pick concepts against the Ravens in the past. They did a ton of that. The Steelers in the Roethlisberger era just did a ton of it against the Ravens. And he basically said, and I saw the reason the question came up is because I saw they had done a rub drill that day. To just do that on the field. And I go, I have not often seen you run the rub drill here. And he was like in full denial about the thing. It was funny. Well, shame on
just
us.
Watched the drill.
Yeah.
I mean, you literally, and surely he knew what was on the practice plan, whether it was an 8-minute drill or a 12-minute drill. I mean, so that's just crazy. I mean, to be able to,
he wasn't denying that the practice had occurred. He's denying that they hadn't rubbed as often, and there was one big one historically I could remember. You remember Macklin when he was here? Wasn't a very positive time, but Watson, the tight end, ran a rub to get him free in the opener against Cincinnati, the one they won 20-0 a few years back. That game, that's the last time I can remember them having run. Not since, of course, but
you should be. I mean, I would expect the head coach at any level, if a reporter or a fan or a parent said, hey, I saw you running this particular drill in practice. How does that relate to what you guys call? Or I think they should be flattered and impressed. I mean, I so often, in my opinion, the questions that these guys get asked are such surface level. They're not even surface level. So that's one that you observed a drill and asked how it related to what you were or were not seeing, what we were or were not seeing. And so I think that's I think that's pretty cool to ask the question, really. I hope we see more of it, and I hope it helps out some of our receivers and tight ends, be a little bit more efficient. And I hope it helps out Lamar as well. I think this guy's going to be prepared, Declan Doyle. That's my ultimate overriding thought, after watching a lot of the film and hearing him talk and watching some of the interaction between him and Lamar on the field. You guys are there more often, and everyone who is there, seems to have pretty much the same opinion.
It's going to be very exciting to watch this offense. It would be my prediction about it. It's just we're going to see things we haven't seen before. We're going to see things that are working that we like, that he goes back to because they work. I mean, I think that there's going to be a lot of things about this that we really find exciting. And, the McDonald offense, there were some growing pains, McDonald defense, sorry. There were some growing pains right off the bat in the, the loss to Miami, of course, in 22. But, it ended up being something very special by 2023. I don't think it's even going to take a year to be great with this offense, because I think the talent on offense is extremely high right now.
Yeah.
I think they have enough to.
One piece that I know you'll want to do a good great here for Durham Smythe in a moment, but one piece I hope he takes that we can see as fans to our untrained eyes is, and you kind of alluded to it or mentioned, is setup plays. And one of the things that Ben Johnson was amazing at, even dating back to 2023, was, let's say you got a 4th and 2 in the third quarter. He'll line up in a formation that he's already lined up in 3 or 4 times in the game previously. So he knows how you're going to line up. And if you get, let's say you got confirmation all 4 times you lined up a certain way, he's pretty confident on this 4th and 2 how you're going to line up, right? And in fact, it happened in the Ravens game this year, even though Ben Johnson wasn't in Detroit, right? Think the 4th and 2 pass
Yeah.
from Jared Goff to Amon-Ra St. Brown.
To put
They
the
had
game
lined
away.
up,
Yep.
yeah, they put the game away. It was same formation, same motion that they had used twice before. Once on that drive, I think, and once on a previous drive. Point being, if he grabs anything from Ben Johnson and uses it a lot, I hope it's that. I hope it's that we're going to set things up almost like I don't know if you want to call it back mapping or whatever, but confirmation. No, giving your team an advantage in that 4th and 2, in that 2-point conversion situation, because we know how you're going to line up. And really, what it amounts to is that Lamar will know how you're going to line up, in that moment. And I just think Lamar is too good for him to have, confirmation about what a team is doing at this point in time. Who he is just radically different from 2018, 2019, all of those years. Which is very similar to what you were just talking about with Mike Macdonald, the progression of learning that occurred in 2022. I'm of the opinion that I do not think Doyle and Weaver will both be back after this year. I think it's quite possible that one of them is gone, depending on where we end up record-wise and how good the offense or the defense is.
Yeah, I think there's a high percent chance that's true. And I might say it's about right now it'd be about 70-30 that it's Doyle who leaves before Weaver based on the reputation. Weaver is a very impressive man at the podium, still a great leader of men. And boy, if you're hiring a CEO head coach, Anthony Weaver's your guy. So I hope he has a big impact on all elements of the defense, because the relatability of a player, there's very few guys who are his age, and he's getting close to 50 because he was a rookie. He'd be like 46, 47 years old now, Anthony Weaver is. But he relates extremely well to young players, extremely well. You don't have to be a 30-year-old coach to do that if you're a very manly coach like Weaver is, and that's impressive. Okay, a couple more points on Smythe, and we'll go to good and a great season. He did play 5 units of special teams, including as a wing on the field goal kick unit. But he didn't really have a good coverage year in 2025, 2 tackles, 3 misses, and bigger than that, 3 special teams penalties. That's one thing he's going to need to get better at. But important point about him is he's a special teams big, which means he can play the offensive line on the punting team. That's very important. You don't have to be a great coverage guy there, but you have to contribute something in addition to blocking to make sure that punt doesn't get blocked.
Yeah, I got him at 2, unless I'm looking at the wrong year, 25, like 230 special team snaps. So yeah, I mean, a lot of special team, essentially 50% of their special team snaps, which basically means, he's not playing on kickoff and he's not playing on kick return. He's playing on almost everything else. So, there's some value there, a big guy. And I think he could give us more from a receiving standpoint than what we saw in the last couple of years. He's got big shoes to fill from a run and pass blocking perspective as far as Ricard goes.
Yeah. All right. Well, what does a good season look like for Durham Smythe?
Minimal penalties. Obviously, you kind of just talked about it with special teams, and then decisive run blocking. So when we're going to put someone in front of Derrick Henry, which let's be honest, whether there's a fullback in front of Derrick Henry or not, Derrick Henry is who he is. Like he's excellent on zone schemes. He's excellent on gap or counter schemes or option stuff. It really doesn't matter, in my opinion. So he's just got to be decisive, and he's got to earn Derrick Henry's trust, because I think I even heard Henry talk about it in 2024 with Ricard. He's like, I know I can follow Pat up to a certain point. I don't have to necessarily, try to set things up. So I think Smythe's got to earn Henry's trust. A good season would be earning Henry's trust, double-digit receptions, or close to double-digit receptions, and then minimal penalties while still serving as I think he's a wing on extra point.
Yep, field goal kick, yes.
Yeah. I think he's a wing on extra point. So, and doing a pretty good job there. I think we need him to stay healthy, because I'm not so sure. And I'm a big fan of Cuevas. We talked about him a lot on our DraftSignal.pro website, and I was, higher on him than a lot of other people. I'm just not sure that Cuevas or Hibner, certainly not Hibner, in my opinion, is ready for, 25, 30 snaps a game. So Smythe's got to stay healthy, bare minimum.
Yeah. All right. Great. Let's talk about a good season from my perspective then. Provides multifaceted contributions as a blocker, receiver, and special teams player. Pass blocking remains at a plus level with the added bonus of better than Ricard value as a receiver. And that's as high as I need to put it. Ricard had a little bit of value as a receiver. It wasn't much. I think that Smythe needs to be a little better than that. And in aggregate, it won't be a lot better, I don't believe, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Run blocking improves with scheme and the ability to keep his feet in level 2 and 3. You talk about decisiveness. I want that. I want him to get out into level 2 and level 3, move like a tight end. And he's not a particularly fast guy, but move like a tight end and keep his feet with his blocks. And what that allows you to do in level 2 or level 3 is pivot with that block as a runner makes his move past you. And that's what you see out of receivers and tight ends. Isaiah Likely, we saw it from. We've seen it from Tylan Wallace in the past. To pick a good wide receiver blocker. And when you get that and you keep your feet, it's fantastic. I want to see that from Smythe. The counterexample would be offensive linemen almost always lunge in level 2. They're bigger. Oftentimes they shouldn't even be blocking. They should just be positioning their hips relative to a player that's at a distance, has no interest in making contact with them, but they tend to lunge in space. And generally speaking, the tight ends who are good blockers know how to keep their feet. I see his special teams play has to improve to the mean such that he's a value as a special teams big. I don't think he was that this last year with the penalties and with some of the missed tackles on special teams. If it's a good year, the Ravens don't regret this signing, but I still think his 2027 spot will depend on the development of Cuevas, probably Hibner as well, and the Ravens' willingness to sink additional draft capital into the tight end position. Some of that will depend on Mark Andrews. If Mark Andrews has another really bad year this year, and he had a really bad year last year, but if he were to have another year that badly, Ravens are going to have to think about significant tight end draft capital, even though they just drafted a couple guys in later rounds this year.
Yeah. I think with the run blocking stuff, Henry is so. I don't know this, obviously. Don't get to watch the drills, but watching the game film, Henry is. Some guys are one step ahead as a vision running back. I think Henry's 2 or 3 steps ahead sometimes. He's hedging a certain side, and he's almost at times assuming, okay, that guy's going to get the linebacker. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm setting up the safety. And I think back to, I think it was Dallas 2024. Was that week 3? We were 0-2, went down there. There was a run into the boundary in that game. I must have watched it 20 times, and it made my jaw drop. We knew that Derek Henry was great, right? You'd have to be a moron not to. But it was the moment when I was like, oh my God, we haven't had one of these. I don't remember who that player would have been. Maybe Jamal Lewis from an effectiveness standpoint for a while, but from a vision and preparedness standpoint, there just aren't too many Derek Henrys in the world. And so Smythe, to me, in a great season, he earns Henry's trust quick, because I don't want nor think we can afford to go out there and start the way we've started some of these other seasons, in Harbaugh's last 2 or 3 years. 2023, a little bit different. But, even 2019, right, we were a very different team. Yeah, we were a very different team. So I think Smythe, if he earns the trust quickly of Henry on some of those lead concepts, not only does he earn Henry's trust, but he earns Doyle's, even though he played for Doyle last year. And then Doyle knows, okay, I can call single back stuff with Henry back there by himself, or I can call I formation stuff, and it kind of doesn't matter. I can run the same concepts. In my opinion, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, we were a little bit predictable when we were in the I, not about necessarily run pass, but about which run concepts we were getting ready to call. And so I would hope in a great season, when Smythe's being on the field, you've got 2 things that happen. We're not overly predictable run pass, which is kind of generic, but we're also not predictable about which run schemes we're going to get into, whether he's in the backfield or set up as a tight end. Huge fan of Pat Ricard, and what he did here was fantastic. How many dudes have played 2 ways in the NFL? Truly remarkable. Having said that, the play calling that we had in 24 and 25 when he was in the backfield in the I was a little bit predictable from my mind, and I'm quite sure that some NFL teams picked up on it. It didn't matter sometimes. Hey, Derrick Henry's just that good.
All right, that's great. I'll go to my great season. I'll give it to you just word for word here. I'll say he develops a connection with Lamar as a receiver who he practices with through his first camp here, and that results in a few more regular season targets. And I'm thinking targets maybe 15 to 20 is the range I'm putting on it for what could be a great year for him if he hits these other landmarks as well. Productivity as a receiver improves slightly to 6.5 yards per target or better. That's not really a very high bogey. He's been at 8.5 yards per target as recently, I think, as 3 years ago. So, and then he had a pretty significant number of targets that year. However, he also makes strides as a blocker that cement his value to the team, both run and pass, with commitment to learning the scheme. I don't think that's going to be a problem given the origin of both players. Certainly, he knows the terminology, but we don't know if the scheme is going to be exactly the same as Ben Johnson. You're saying Ben Johnson 2.0. I kind of hope we see Declan Doyle 1.0. And whatever the case, whatever it actually looks like, I hope he's a guy and kind of a leader in terms of helping other people understand what's going on in those schemes. A little more than that, though. He's got to also have special teams player that includes solid blocking on punt coverage, a better missed tackle rate, no penalties. And if that were to all happen, I think the Ravens certainly would look to extend him. They will figure out what they have in the rest of the room independently from a decision to continue on with a player like Smythe, because blocking tight ends that are really good are hard to find. The Ravens actually have a guy this year, by the way. This is kind of an interesting thing, Coach. Lucas Scott has really slimmed down now, is looking like trying to be more of a somewhere tight between end. A Boyle and a Ricard as a tight end. Yeah,
I think the catch percentage, whatever the number ends up being, as far as total catches or targets, the catch percentage is what's got to improve. I think, if memory serves, the last 3 years in Miami, he was at like 81%, 76, and like 82 or 83. So you had a high percentage catch percentage at the same time that you're like 21, 34, and I think 35 catches, somewhere in that range. So to me, and then the catch percentage the last 2 years, I think, dipped as well. So it's got to be efficiency there, which to me is related to just overall impact, overall effectiveness of the scheme. If we're in a whole bunch of 2nd and 2s, I don't know if you saw it on Twitter the last couple of days, someone posted like it was a Greg Roman attacking tweet, kind of like on the last 137 2nd and 1s, Greg Roman has run it every time except one. So whether I believe that or not, my point is, hopefully we're in a whole bunch of 2nd and 2s, 2nd and 3s. And Durham Smythe can get some of these play action stuff in the flat for 8 yards to get us a first down, give Derek Henry. And to me, what's important is that some of these other guys, Smythe, Andrews, I'm omitting Zay Flowers here because he's a potential star. Some of these other supporting players convert some of these 2nd and 3s so that on that particular snap, Lamar and Derek Henry didn't have to do anything. So that when it's go time, when it's money time, those guys can make their plays. Lamar, Henry, and Zay Flowers. We need some type of elevation from it's got to be from Smythe, since we're missing Likely and Kolar. My question would be, one thought that I've had while we're talking, what if Kolar was on this roster and Smythe was here? If we had Kolar, Smythe, and Andrews, I think we would all feel really good about what we've got in that room.
Yeah, they wouldn't have drafted Cuevas if that was the case. And,
right.
And I think that's right. the 4 they'd be going with would include Hibner as a completely dedicated split, which I think he is anyway. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. So to me, I think that would be something that, the Ravens, in a perfect world, that's where we would have ended up, with a more quality 2 and 3 tight end that resembles what Chicago had last year, Kmet being their number 2 and Smythe being their number 3.
All right, great. Let's move on to Tyler Loop now and talk about him a little bit. The first Ravens kicker ever drafted in round 6 a year ago had a solid rookie year, really, until that final miss at Pitt. And it's not like there weren't potholes. There definitely were. We're going to talk about that. But a guy, I think, who is, his rookie year is probably going to be remembered for this one missed kick, but actually is pretty effective for a rookie kicker, going 30 of 34 and plus 0.0 on expected points as the FTN captures it. So they're basically taking like what percentage of the time should he have made each of these field goals that he attempted based on the distance. Did have some problems at long distance, but talk about his rookie year.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly looked as the year progressed and we learned more. I think his long was 52 or 53, somewhere in that range. And
It's in week one.
with
Yeah.
with what the NFL has done, I mean, let's be honest, they've artificially made this into a situation where you can reliably kick 55, 57, 58 yarders now. They've turned the 50 yarder into a 58 yarder, and they've done so. I use the word artificially quite intentionally. But having said that, at every level of football, there's K balls. There's always kicking balls. And I've been around people, not that I've coached with, but I've observed people who quite obviously were, doing things to the kicking balls that they weren't doing to the quarterback balls. Think Tom Brady with the, deflate gate and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, we knew at some point, week 8, 9, that Loop was kind of limited as far as distance. I felt like he was pretty consistent about what we were going to get out of him. If I remember correct, someone posted on Twitter watching him 2 games in a row. I forget which 2 home games it was. And they said pregame he appeared to be struggling with stuff, I think from the right hash. Now, we didn't see it manifest itself in games at all, so I don't know I don't know if he's a guy who normally fades it a little bit. And so therefore from the right hash, it would trouble.
So I'll speak to that because I've watched Luke kick in practice a lot. In fact, one of the times I just got directly behind the goalpost and I was kind of watching him.
Draw.
While it's the natural is the hook. He actually is a natural, right to left hooker, as he is looking at the ball.
Yeah.
Right. And the natural progression as they do field goal drills at camp is to go left hash, right hash, sometimes a middle in between, but they're basically bouncing between the left and right hash.
I mean, the ball's on the hash 70% of the time.
There you go. More, exactly. So you actually, a lot of times in the NFL, you have to set the ball up for the kicker on a really important kick to try and put it in the middle, and they'll do that if it's a short kick to win a game. But with what I saw with Loop is definitely a very natural hook, and then of course that got away from him in the very final kick of the year when he did. He actually hit it pretty straight, but he hit it to the right. And what one thing you really love to see, and Randy Brown, boy, great kicking coach. He preaches to no end the end over end rotation of the football. He wants to see a straight football kick. And if you're watching field goals, and in particular, if you have that really nice behind the kicker angle, look for the end over end rotation. If the end over end rotation is solid coming off the foot, it's almost always going to be good, almost from any distance. But if there's any kind of a wobble to the ball, you're not only are you probably praying, your prayers are not going to be answered on that ball going through the uprights.
If I remember correct, I almost felt like as soon as he kicked it, his body language looked like he was like, uh-oh, this one might not be, I guess, coming back, but I don't, I haven't looked at that play. It's such a, such a difficult and unusual play to encapsulate and react to, because we've all got, Bisciotti sat there and said, when he fired Harbaugh, he said, a reporter asked him, hey, if Luke makes that kick, how long would that have extended Harbaugh? And Bisciotti said 1 week. Mm-hmm. I mean, let's be honest. We're not beating the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans annihilate last year's Baltimore Ravens team. That defense was as good as it gets.
They actually did in the regular season too.
Yes, they beat us the same way. The only difference will be if we commit to the run game more and we shorten the game and only lose by 10 points because the clock is running more. So I credit Bisciotti for that answer. It sounded honest to me. He doesn't strike me as a guy who sees the need to tell people lies because what he's done. So as far as Luke goes, I won't lie to you. There was about 20% of me that when he missed that kick that kind of breathed a sigh of relief, in that this is finally over. This season is finally over, because it was so frustrating and so maddening. But the competitive side, the 80% that roots for the Ravens and wants to see Lamar win, was like, hey, I want to see him get in the playoffs because I know what the criticism is going to look like in the offseason that he didn't make the playoffs. So such a difficult moment to witness, and the fact that Loop is a rookie and he's got to carry that with him for the next time that he's trying to win a game, whether it's division, playoffs, regular season, or not.
He's extremely well grounded. We heard him talk once at the podium this year, and he there's a heavy faith-based component, which I understand it. I understand a lot of people are very religious in this country. I don't happen to pick up on that same thing, and I don't derive strength from those same kind of things. And I hope you won't think of less of me for that. But he's very faith-based, and what I'd say is whatever it takes to make yourself be grounded, to make yourself be the best you can be. If faith is what does it for you, that's fantastic. So he talks a lot about, reading scripture on a daily basis and doing that sort of thing to, to gain strength. Kyle Hamilton had a great comment about it. He said, we can't all be trying to make him feel better about what happened. And I'm paraphrasing slightly. His ability to pick himself up has to come from within. He has to
Yeah,
find that strength internally, and that's. I thought Luke, he was perfectly happy to talk about it. I
he
know it
did
was
right after the game, didn't he?
he did talk after the game. You're correct. I've been really talking about even looking back at it at this minicamp or OTA, one of the two. He was at the podium and he talked extensively. There were a lot of questions about it. But you're right. I mean, the fact that he was able to talk after the game about it, that is very unusual for a kicker who's just missed an enormous kick to
Yeah.
go to the podium and talk about it. Justin Tucker did it after he missed the extra point to lose that Saints game in 2018. That was unusual as well. And I think he's going to be fine. I really do. But
I
I
think
guess
he's
we'll see.
consistent. To use a golf analogy, Loop to me seems to have very low percent misses, and I don't mean missing field goals. I mean missing off his spot, whatever
Yeah.
whatever his shape is supposed to look like. To use a golf analogy, number one, number two. I think he's 20. He was 23 during the regular season, or did he already turn 24? Young guy, so he's going to be around a while. But the reality is, competition's right around the corner for these guys that are drafted. 4-year contract is what they get,
Mhm.
and so if it's not this year, it'll be next year that the Ravens will be either looking at drafting someone or bringing someone in for competition, and I hope they do. I mean, we want it to be the best quality product that is. I think that Mentor will look for opportunities to give Loop that chance again, and we need to do that in the regular season. We would love to, of course, get a touchdown and not need a game-winning field goal. You're never going to play for a game-winning field goal if you get a touchdown. I guess my point is, I hope that in the first 6 weeks we get another opportunity to
Win a
see
game
him
with a kick.
asked see him asked to do so
Yeah.
for his own confidence, and so we know. I mean, how many opportunities do we need to see? If we got to 3 and we missed all 3 of them, that to me would be concerning.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, there is a lot of other evidence from this rookie year. I did want to talk about a couple of those other elements because probably the most disturbing thing is not his field goal and extra point thing. He missed 2 extra points. He missed one against Buffalo. It was very costly. They lost the game 41-40, and that's not
Yep.
often mentioned as one of the reasons. Probably because Buffalo missed a couple of 2-point conversions as well. But that was not a good start for him really in that game, despite the fact he had his 50-yard field goal. But one thing that's often forgotten is the Ravens kick in some of the crappiest weather of any NFL team. A lot of the teams that are further in the north, they have domes, and so do some of the ones to the south. And any dome is so far better in terms of kicking conditions than any outdoor facility. And the Ravens, of course, also play in the AFC North, where all the teams play outside. And have some really terrible off the lake kicking conditions in both Cleveland and Pittsburgh, and Cincinnati too. But Cincinnati's a windy city in terms of being a difficult place to kick. So the weather that the Ravens face in a typical year is poor, and FTN has a weather adjustment that I don't believe is figured in. That 0.0 is my long-winded way of getting to that. Now, the one thing I really have a concern about is kickoffs horribly erratic during the year. He missed the landing zone short. He kicked it in the end zone some.
Yeah.
He kicked it out of bounds some. And all of those that's something he's really got to improve on.
All those college kickers coming in are, it's a huge adjustment for them, obviously, because you've got the actual real kickoff in the college football. We got this bullshit in the NFL that these guys have got to adapt to. And so hopefully in year 2, he'll be able to do that. I do like some of the kickoff coverage schemes that I saw us run last year. I spent a little bit of time watching the end zone angle. I decided not to do a video of it because there's just not a whole lot of variation. I mean, to be honest with you, there's not a whole lot that can be done. I remember, everybody talking about like, oh, this is going to be so interesting, these different blocking schemes. Guess what? They didn't really vary a whole lot. I mean, there was, 2 or 3 things that generally did. Loop's got to be way better, I think, about finding his spot when he's not. What would you estimate those guys are kicking at as far as percentage, right? When Loop's trying to make a game-winning field goal against the Steelers there, he's probably at 94, 96, 98%, something like that as far as his effort level and what he's
Oh,
trying to do as
his
far as
effort level or his percentage success rate? What do you?
no, what he's trying to do as far as hitting the ball accurately.
Okay.
When we're trying to hit a golf ball, you're not trying to hit it. Maybe sometimes you are, but you're not trying to hit it 100% every time. Sometimes you're
Okay.
just going back to like 9 o'clock instead of going all the way to
Gotcha.
12.
Okay.
So as far as kickoffs, those guys are probably dialing it back to, I would say 55, 60%,
Yeah.
maybe even less than that. That to me seems to be what Loop is struggling with. Again, to use a
Okay.
golf analogy, instead of going 6 to 9, he's probably going like 6 to 8, and he's really struggling with, do I want to get to 52%, 58%? That to me seemed to be a real struggle.
So maybe another way to put it is, I
Kickoffs.
mean, it's like using a 9 iron versus using a 3. When you use a 3, it's almost like you're using a driver. You certainly want to get hard iron on the ball, and you're going for distance more than you're going for accuracy. With the 9 iron, you're going for accuracy, and you're giving up distance to do it, and you got to have the ability to make that change. And by the way, having not played golf in about 20 years now, it's a stretch for me to say that
Well,
exactly.
we use some of the guys that I play with, like we use a clock analogy. You're holding your club down at the ground
Okay.
at 6, and you're going up to 12 for a full swing. Trying to get everything in. You're steadying at 9, and 9 for me at least was like, I know what 9 is going to give me. I know what that how far that's going to get me with every club. And so Luke to me seemed to be struggling with those kickoffs.
Okay.
It's kind of in between clubs, if you will, to use a golf analogy again, and perhaps it's not a great one, but a way to hope in year 2 that we're a whole lot better, number one, and that they've looked at the mistakes. Like, what are we doing wrong here? Why are we how many times did he miss short last year? Was it 3?
Yeah, that's about the number. I mean, every time it happens, it's a complete annoyance. But he had shorts and out of bounds both. I couldn't tell you the number of each.
Yeah, they're trying to put it to a certain side for a certain scheme,
Yep.
blocking scheme by the offense that they're expecting, and trying to pin someone and with their players' reactions, and maybe they're even trying to get it to a certain player's side as far as the top tacklers, the guys, the defenders. I guess you have to refer to it in that way. So I expect that he'll get better. I think a lot of those rookie kickers coming in are going to have adjustment periods with that kickoff, because it's such a different skill that they haven't ever really been asked to do.
Right. And we have not talked much about the rest of the Wolf Pack that's with him. I think he's got an outstanding group. He certainly did with Stout. Stout was a very fine holder, and Moore is a very consistent long snapper. I think Eckley comes in with the reputation as being quite a good holder, so that'll be good to see if that stays put. He's already there've been some long kicks made this offseason. There were some long kicks made last offseason. It's not like he doesn't have the leg to kick from much longer range. He's been successful at a kick, I think a 62-yarder at Arizona, right? And I think he has had a 63 and a 68 in practice with the Ravens. So he's got the big leg necessary to do these things.
Yeah.
And I hope we certainly see some of that. The one other thing you mentioned that I want to go back to for a second was competition for him. Competition at the kicker position is healthy enough. The only downside to it is you take a few reps away from your starting kicker. An older Justin Tucker, that doesn't matter. So you're fine doing it. And the Ravens were able to derive value from the fact that these guys had been through camp. In fact, you go look back at Kari Vedvik. They traded him for a 5th-round draft pick. Damn it. I mean, that's ridiculous. Or a kicker for a 5th-round draft pick. Luke was a 6th-round pick. This is the kind of thing you're talking about getting. But the Vikings, in their desperation, went for that kind of a deal with the Ravens. Randy Brown really has a monopoly on kicking camps that allows him to have most of the guys work with him first. And if they do want to do that, I mean, come at a training camp with the Baltimore Ravens is a great opportunity for an undrafted kicker. Yep. Great opportunity. You're probably going to get a job somewhere. And, we look back over the years with Hauschka was the first success of the Harbaugh era, but they had other guys, Gano, they had Lutz, went on to great NFL careers. All these guys among the top in terms of accuracy in NFL history. So, I think there is a good chance they'll bring in competition. I don't think it'll be a bad thing when it happens. They've got competition right now for Eckley that I'm surprised has lasted as long as it has with this Elzinga guy.
You mean the punter and the
punter,
holder? Yeah. I mean, the reality is that those are short contracts. Those 4 years, those are short contracts. and they're always looking for value as much as they can. Of course, the salary structure for these guys is quite low. From unfortunately observing the
Mhm.
Terrion Arnold situation, it's kind of like made me, in some of my thoughts here recently, like feel bad for these guys who don't take advantage of the opportunities that are there. And it's a very short opportunity. What's the average NFL career? Like 3.4 years or something like that. 3.2. It's very, very low,
Yeah.
short. So Loop, again, going back to two of my statements, like I hope they bring in competition, and I hope we see opportunities before the playoffs this year about whether or not this guy can make a game-winning kick. Do I suspect that he can't? No, I don't. That's not what I'm saying. But I would like to see confirmation that he does at this level before we ask him to do so again, in Buffalo or in Baltimore or in Kansas City or whoever, we end up facing, hopefully in the playoffs. That's a valid question I think that fans should have. I don't think that it means he'll never make one because he missed the only one he got. It's so hypocritical. I mean, I call upon myself as a hypocrite as well. Some people are like, we got a guy who can't make a game-winning kick, but I'm thankful he missed it because we got rid of Harbaugh. Like, it's so ridiculous to listen to some of these things or read them, I guess, actually, in some of my comment sections.
Well, they also wouldn't have gotten Ioane with the with a lower pick
Right.
like that, and we certainly wouldn't have had the play to options they did at number 14, which was kind
Unbelievable,
of
right?
cool. Yeah.
Unreal. I mean,
Let's talk about a good season. What does a good season look like for Tyler Loop?
as reliable as he was from 20 to 29 and 30 to 39 last year, extends that, the longest field goal that he makes out a little bit, but I think improved not just getting it in the landing zone. I even hate using that phrase, landing zone, but where he's landing it, the
Yeah.
location on kickoffs to me is important, being more consistent there. Because I think we're going to play a high quality level defense, and those 10 yards or maybe some cases 12 or 15-yard difference is huge. The NFL has, again, I'm going to use artificially set up a situation where teams' offensive starting position has been pushed forward a certain number of yards, probably to try to generate more points, probably to try to get the ball closer to field goal range. And, I think that's pretty obvious when you look at the totality of the rules changes they've done. So we've got to, maximize as much as possible, keeping the other team's offense back so that Minter and Weaver can do their job and get our offense the ball back. As far as a good season, I think he's got to be, what was he, 1 of 5 last year from
50 plus. That's right.
50,
I
somewhere in
think it
that
might have been
range?
1 of 4, but either way, maybe
Yeah.
one was over 60. Could that be? So
Okay. So, I mean, for me, with what they're doing to the balls now, we've got to be better there. With how many other kickers across the league made 57 plus field goals at a decent percentage last year, we've got to be way better than 1 for 4. Granted, maybe Harbaugh and the offensive staff last year didn't give him more of those opportunities for various reasons, some of which are his own limitations at the time, some of which might have had to do with the game situation. Do we think we can score a touchdown? Do we think we can get the first down? So I hope we're better there, maybe somewhere in the range of 3 out of 5, 60%, because so much of the rest of the NFL is taking advantage of those distances at a high clip or high percentage.
right. That's a good way to put it. I was simpler with it in terms of a good season. I'd say kickoffs need to improve. It's really hard to imagine they would not. He basically needs to cut out the bad kicks, cut out the kicks that are short of the landing zone, cut out the out of bounds kick. If he cuts all of those kind of mistakes to 1 during the season, I'd say that's a good season. There are kickers who cannot kick it short or out of bounds the entire year. But if he had 1, that to me would be a good season. And then on the field goal and extra point side, I'm just going to simplify it. I think he needs to be at maybe about +3 points with weather consideration, plus 1.5 before weather, plus would be about +3 after weather for a team like the Ravens who kick in some terrible weather, like I mentioned earlier. If he could do those 2 things, I think it's a good season. I'm not going to put any specific expectations in terms of he needs to make a big kick or he needs to do any of this. That'll happen when it happens. But the Ravens could be so dominant in terms of game script this year in particular with the schedule they're playing that, the situation never evolves. And that's fine too. That's fine too. You hope he gets put in the situation, but in another sense, you really hope the Ravens are dominant enough that they're winning games by 10 points, 14 points, and 32 points, that they don't have that even come up in a fair number of games.
Yeah, and maybe try to avoid certain areas of the Brown Stadium and the Steelers Stadium in the fourth quarter. That one in Pittsburgh is bad, but I'm sure in Cleveland that one end of the stadium is just terrible. I mean, I've been there enough times to just be shocked at how cold it is coming off of that lake,
Mercury.
and so try to. In some cases you're not in control. You didn't win the coin flip. So some cases it's out of your control, but try to avoid those areas of those sides of the stadium, excuse me, in the fourth quarter as well. A great season to me would be a game-winning kick somewhere in the first 6 or 8 weeks. And when I say great, I mean, again, some of that will be mentor's decision, how they play things out in a game-winning situation. What Lamar and those guys they think they have. Trying to attack and go for a touchdown versus a game-winning field goal. I would love to see a game-winning kick in the first 6 or 8 weeks for Luke to build some confidence, for the players to build confidence, him to be super efficient from beyond 50 yards if and when called upon. Some of the things that these guys did last year across the league was ridiculous. Was it a Jacksonville guy?
Yeah, Jacksonville had a 70-yarder, right?
Yeah, just insanity. So if people can't see what they're doing, how much of an impact, I don't know, what you're watching at all. So for me, Loop, given what the rest of the league is doing, Luke to me cannot be in the same as last year as far as conversion percentage from 50 to 59, and even the high 40s in my opinion. It's got to be a higher efficiency level, number one, at a longer distance.
That was the only kick he missed under 50 was that last one, the 44-yarder against Pittsburgh. And very unfortunate, obviously. Great season for me. Quality of the Moore and Eckley long snapper holder combination shines through. And I hope that will take Loop to the top quartile of the league in terms of field goal and extra points relative to expectations. That'd be somewhere around +4 for the year. And that's, again, pre-weather, which is going to pump that up even more. And then I want him to deliver on the placement of kickoffs pretty much uniformly in the year. That means hitting the landing zone properly, and you don't have to make sacrifices in direction to do so. So, for example, you might want to pin the guy against the right sideline to start the return, because that's obviously a very advantageous position to try and cover that kick. But you don't want to have Loop cheating 5 yards inside the spot so that he makes sure he gets it in the landing spot. So hopefully his just accuracy of those place kicks off the tee gets better than what it has been in the past. And obviously that might be his biggest thing that he needs to get right this year. I think that probably cost the Ravens a little bit more than the field goals and extra points did. He was perfectly fine in that area as a rookie, even though he missed the big one.
96% or 95% on extra points. Pretty high, right?
Yeah, he missed two and he missed one big one, but still, yeah.
Anecdotally saw something, or actually a conversation with a high school coach recently that was very interesting. He has a pretty high level kicker. I think he's a 3-star recruit, and kicks right footed, but has already started practicing on the NFL style kickoff in expectation. Yeah, in expectation for the day. Apparently, some kicker trainers are already working with kids on those things at a younger age, even though they won't be asked to do it in college. But the kid and his coach had a unique perspective on it. I think he's a rising senior. Kicks right-footed for everything: punts, extra points, field goals. But on his NFL-style kickoffs, he's a soccer player. He's kicking left-footed.
Wow. Okay.
So the idea is a different leg sweep path, because it is literally asking you to do something different than you are in all of those other. And I thought to myself, and it's a very small school that's never had a kicking recruit like this. So I was really intrigued. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's something if Randy Brown is at the podium this year, I'd love to ask him that question specifically. That's a great example. But it could be, particularly you talk about it being a soccer thing. It could be, just knowing how to do a corner kick from either side. You might go left-footed from one side and right-footed from the other. I think it's more likely you'd be this. Yeah. Anyway. What else to say about this? Really appreciate having you on, Coach. Outstanding. Always, we run a little bit long on these things because we just love talking football so much, and I appreciate that about you. Some fantastic interesting things. Tell folks where they can find your website.
Well, we are working on. You mean DraftSignal.pro for the NFL draft? Yeah, we are working on the 2027 version. Very slowly. I think I've only got three players now. Colin Simmons, the kid from Friendship Collegiate, the DN for South Carolina, whose name escapes me for a moment, and I forget the other guy. We've only got three so far. It's been very slow moving there. I would like to get 40 of them done in summer scouting so that for the draft next year, the presentation and the quality was different. We are going to change the format a little bit and have a little bit more like let's take like Blake Miller and Ruben Bain. I think they played against each other in 2024, maybe 23. And so the idea is we want to have some
Top
one-on
one-on-one matchups.
yeah, so like maybe a 2.5 minute segment on the site, no commentary necessarily. That's just Ruben Bain versus Blake Miller, and people can kind of see it themselves. We thought we found that some of the pages where there was 3 minutes of video or 4 minutes of video, some of the data indicated that people actually sat around and watched it, and that's the idea. That's what we would like is to do. So it's a lot of fun. None of us made any money off of it, which was never any of the intention. It was really just to try to, can we do this? And it all came together. So that's still something I work on weekly when I get time. And I'm really looking forward to the beginning of the NFL season for real. Just it seems like this time period takes so long to get to the beginning of camp.
All right. He's Coach All _22 _films on Twitter. Please give him a follow. You'll be happy you did, and include a tag him in some conversations, I think, is always a good idea. But appreciate you, Coach. Thanks for coming on. Other folks out there, thanks for listening. Appreciate all the loyalty. Appreciate it. Listening through to the end of a long episode like this. I always know the fans that are still listening to us are the real diehards who'll listen for this content anytime it's there. And I appreciate the hell out of you. Please use #FilmStudyRavens for your questions. I'll direct them to the appropriate show. Coach, thanks again for coming on.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks a whole lot, guys.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.